Put on your headphones, take a slow breath, and welcome to Gentle History. Tonight, we travel into the quiet corridors of medieval power, not the fantasy realm of Westeros, but the real world of kings, lords, alliances, ambition, and strategy. The world that inspired the character we know as Tywin Lannister. Although Tywin is fictional, his cold discipline, his political genius, and his mastery of legacy all come from real medieval rulers, men whose presence shaped kingdoms, men whose quiet decisions changed history. Tonight, you will meet them slowly, one by one, not in battle, but in calm moments, in candlelit rooms, in the soft stillness where true power usually moves. Our journey begins with the man most strongly tied to Tywin's character, Richard Neville, the Kingmaker. The Kingmaker. Imagine England in the mid-1400s, a land of stone keeps, morning fog, and a silence heavy with political tension. Here lived Richard Neville, a nobleman of immense discipline and composure. He rarely raised his voice. He rarely acted in anger. He simply observed, calculated, and moved. Neville was born into wealth, but wealth wasn't what made him dangerous. It was his ability to understand people, their motives, their ambitions, their weaknesses. Like Tywin, he believed that family legacy mattered more than personal comfort. He did not chase luxury. He chased stability and the future of his house. The era was the Wars of the Roses, a long struggle between rival houses for control of England, a real-life version of the political chessboard you see in Game of Thrones. While others fought blindly, Neville mastered the chaos, calmly, quietly. He placed kings on the throne. He removed kings from it. And he did it without theatrics, without emotion, with nothing but calculation. When you picture Tywin in a dim tent, planning years ahead, you are seeing the spirit of Richard Neville. A quiet portrait of power. Imagine him now, standing in a long hall of stone, sunlight drifting through narrow windows, dust floating slowly in the air. His battlefield wasn't the open field. It was a table covered in scrolls, letters, alliances to manage, and silent power to negotiate. This is where Richard Neville shaped the fate of nations, in stillness, in patience, in silence. He never wanted a crown for himself, but kings feared him, because a kingmaker can build you, and a kingmaker can end you. Neville is the first of the real men behind Tywin Lannister, but our journey continues toward another ruler, a king whose ambition and discipline echo Tywin's presence, Edward I of England. Edward IV, the Iron King. We continue our journey deeper into the medieval world to meet another man whose spirit echoes through Tywin Lannister's character. His name was Edward I of England, a king remembered not only for his victories, but for his discipline, his unwavering sense of duty, and his belief that a ruler must be feared before he is loved. Edward ruled in the late 1200s, a time of castles rising across the landscape, armies marching in silence over cold hills, and a kingdom trying to define its identity. He was tall, imposing, with a presence that filled a room the moment he stepped inside, not because he shouted, but because everything about him radiated control. This same energy would become a core part of Tywin Lannister's character, a ruler who does not need to raise his voice, because everyone already knows exactly what he expects. The king, who hated disorder. Edward I believed the world should be structured, predictable, organized according to law and duty. He spent his youth watching rebellion tear through England. He saw nobles defy the crown. He saw kings weakened by hesitation. He saw chaos spreading like cracks in stone. And he made a quiet promise to himself, when my time comes, the realm will not fall apart under my hand. This relentless focus on order shaped his entire reign, and centuries later, it helped shape Tywin Lannister. Edward believed that strength was not cruelty. Strength was clarity. Strength was the calm, unshakable presence of a man who knows exactly who he is. The stillness before decisions. Imagine Edward now, not on the battlefield, but in one of his royal chambers. A stone room lit by a single torch, a map spread across a heavy wooden table, inkpots, quills, small carved markers representing armies and alliances. He stands silently over the map, studying, thinking, not forcing a decision, allowing it to form naturally, like a calm tide rising against the shore. This is how Tywin thinks, slowly, deliberately, with a patience that feels almost cold. Edward's strength came not from passion, but from posture, from presence, from the quietness that makes everyone else in the room hold their breath. What Tywin takes from Edward. Tywin. Lannister reflects Edward I in three powerful ways. First, a belief in legacy above all else, for Edward, the kingdom, for Tywin, House Lannister. Second, a fierce commitment to order, not chaos, not weakness, but a structured world where expectations are clear. Third, the understanding that a ruler does not need love to command respect. Edward lived by these principles. Tywin follows them, quietly, in every scene. But our exploration does not end here. There is another figure, perhaps the closest to Tywin's emotional core, a man whose ambition was sharp, whose wealth shaped nations, and whose political skill was unrivaled in his time. We travel now to the court of Burgundy and meet the man some historians call the richest prince of the Middle Ages. His name was Charles the Bold. Charles the Bold, the Lord of Ambition. Our journey now carries us to the late Middle Ages, to the courts of Burgundy, and into the life of a ruler whose shadow stretches across European history. His name was Charles the Bold, a prince so wealthy that poets of his era said his treasuries glittered like a second sun. But Charles was not known only for wealth. He was known for his intensity, his precision, his unbreakable belief that power must be held tightly, or it slips through the fingers like sand. In him, we see one of the clearest reflections of Tywin Lannister, the cold ambition, the expectation of obedience, the iron loyalty to family identity. The Palace of Burgundy. Imagine the Duchy of Burgundy at its height, a realm of silk banners, golden halls, and meticulously organized power. Burgundy was not a kingdom, yet it rivaled kingdoms in wealth and influence. Charles inherited this treasure, but instead of resting in comfort, he sharpened it like a blade. Where others saw luxury, he saw responsibility. Where others relaxed, he planned. Where others hesitated, he moved with cold certainty. This is pure Tywin. The mind that built a powerhouse. Charles the Bold believed that a family's strength came from its unity, from its reputation, and from its ability to command. He surrounded himself with advisors who understood order, discipline, and the delicate balance of diplomacy. He expected loyalty from those beneath him, and absolute respect from those beside him. Even in silence, Charles could dominate a room. Not through anger, but through presence, through the calm intensity of a man who knows his decisions will shape generations. The Tywin parallel. Ambition without embellishment. Tywin Lannister is often portrayed as emotionless, but the truth is more complicated. He does not lack emotion. He simply refuses to show it. Charles the Bold was the same. He loved deeply, but privately. He feared failure, but silently. He dreamed of a greater Burgundy, but never spoke of the dream until the plan was already in motion. To the world, he was cool, composed, and controlled. But beneath the surface, there was fire. This duality is one of the strongest connections between history's Charles the Bold and fiction's Tywin Lannister. A still moment in Burgundy. Imagine Charles now, standing at a balcony in his palace. The night is quiet, only the faint sound of wind slipping between stone towers. Below him, the torches glow along the castle walls. Guards move in steady patterns. The realm breathes in calm order. Charles watches silently, hands resting on the cold stone railing. He is not thinking about tonight. He is thinking about the future, his family's name, his legacy. Tywin would understand this moment perfectly. The end of Burgundy, and a lesson. Charles the Bold pushed his ambitions too far. He believed his realm could stand alone against powerful neighbors. But no dynasty, no matter how wealthy, can survive without allies. This downfall, calm at first, then sudden, is echoed in Tywin's own story. The lesson is quiet, but clear. Power must be calculated, but never isolated. Charles the Bold completes our trio of inspirations. Neville, the strategist; Edward, the Iron King; Charles, the ambitious lord. Together, they shape the silhouette of Tywin Lannister. But our story is not over. There is still one more path to walk. One more influence that shaped the idea of Tywin. The medieval philosophy of legacy itself. We explore that next. The medieval philosophy of legacy. We continue now, away from individual rulers, and into something deeper. Something that shaped every noble house, every court, every silent conversation behind castle doors. It is the medieval idea of legacy, a concept so powerful, so ingrained in the minds of kings and lords, that it ruled them more strongly than any sword or army. Tywin Lannister is built from this idea, because legacy in the medieval world was not simply memory, and not simply family. Legacy was identity itself. To live, to rule, to breathe as a nobleman, was to protect the name you carried. Not for ego, not for pride, but because that name was your shield, your currency, your passport through the dangerous spaces of medieval power. A man might lose a battle, but he could not lose his house. A man might make mistakes, but he could not stain the family bloodline. This belief appears in every medieval chronicle, every family archive, every letter passed between lords. It is the heartbeat behind Tywin Lannister's cold discipline. The weight of a name. Imagine a noble family crest hanging in a quiet stone hall, a simple shield painted with symbols of history. These symbols were not decoration, they were promises. Promises made by ancestors long gone, promises inherited by the living. To medieval rulers, a name could not be separated from duty. It was the reason they worked tirelessly, the reason they acted with severity, the reason they planned for children not yet born. Tywin embodies this entirely. His actions are not guided by emotion, they are guided by responsibility. The same responsibility felt by the kingmakers, the Iron Kings, the ambitious dukes, and countless other rulers who lived centuries before him. The silence of responsibility Picture a medieval lord standing alone in a chamber at dusk. The candles burn low. The room is quiet. Outside the window, the land stretches into soft darkness. In this moment, he is not thinking about war, or alliances, or the noise of daily politics. He is thinking about the house he will leave behind. The silence is heavy, but not frightening. It is the silence of reflection, the silence of a man measuring the weight of his decisions. Tywin Lannister is this silence, calm, loaded, purposeful. This quiet philosophy shaped the Middle Ages. It shaped the rulers we have already met, and it shaped the fictional lord who rose from them. The thread connecting rulers to Tywin Neville's strategy, Edward's order, Charles's ambition. All of them orbit around this one core idea: preserve the house. This is why Tywin is one of the most realistic characters in fantasy. He does not behave like a villain. He behaves like a medieval lord. A man shaped by tradition, duty, responsibility, and the fear of seeing everything collapse. It is a quiet fear, a hidden one, but it guides many of the greatest figures in history. And soon, we will explore how these rulers protected their legacies in daily life, how courts functioned, how alliances were cultivated, how power was maintained without ever raising a voice. We step into that world next. How medieval families maintained power to understand Tywin Lannister. We must look at how real medieval families protected their power. Not through violence alone, but through three quiet pillars: alliances, reputation, and order. Alliances, power, and whispered agreements. Medieval alliances were formed in silence. Two nobles meeting in a private room, a sealed letter exchanged, a marriage arranged not for love, but for the future of an entire house. One quiet conversation could reshape a kingdom. Tywin Lannister mirrors this perfectly. He views marriages and promises as tools of stability, the same way real lords of Europe once did. Reputation. Wealth that never runs out. Gold could be lost. Reputation could not. A house known for honor, or discipline, or cold reliability, could influence others without speaking a word. This is why Tywin focuses so fiercely on the Lannister name. A strong reputation protects a family longer than any fortress. Order within the house. Inside every castle were dozens of moving parts: servants, stewards, guards, horses, supplies, letters. If a household was chaotic, the lord was seen as weak. So medieval rulers demanded calm discipline. They rose early, reviewed accounts, managed stores and soldiers, ensured every corner of the estate ran smoothly. Tywin reflects this exactly. His strict routines, his attention to detail, his expectation that everyone around him stays organized. A quiet castle at dawn. Imagine a keep at first light. Cooks preparing the morning meal, scribes sharpening quills, guards shifting positions along the walls. A medieval lord walks through the hall not loudly, but with a steady confidence. This quiet, predictable rhythm is what kept noble houses alive. And it is this same rhythm that shapes Tywin Lannister's entire character. Next, we enter the true heart of medieval politics, the calm, strategic world behind closed doors, where Tywin's personality comes alive most clearly. The real politics behind Tywin's style. We move now into the quiet heart of medieval politics, a world where power was rarely loud and almost never dramatic. It was a world of letters, timing, presence, and silence. And this world shaped Tywin Lannister more than any battlefield ever could. Medieval politics lived in the space between words. It relied on small gestures, subtle pauses, and careful awareness of who was watching. Real lords understood something simple. The man who speaks least is often the man who controls the room. This principle appears repeatedly in Tywin's scenes, and it comes directly from historical rulers. The power of presence. In medieval courts, a powerful lord did not need to shout. He only needed to enter the room. People straightened their posture. Conversations softened. Attention shifted automatically. Why? Because presence was power. A tall figure, steady footsteps on stone, simple, controlled gestures, a face that revealed nothing. This silence intimidated more than anger ever could. Historical rulers like Edward I, Richard Neville, and Charles the Bold all carried this same quiet authority. Tywin Lannister inherits it completely. The power of timing. Medieval politics was slow by design. A message took days to travel. A decision took weeks of thought. A strategy could unfold over months or even years. This pace created a special kind of leader, one who moved with patience, not impulse. Tywin reflects this. He never rushes. He never reacts emotionally. He waits, observes, and chooses the moment when everyone else is off balance. Historical letters show the same behavior again and again. Quiet lords who never acted early, never acted late, only acted when the timing was perfect. The power of information. Medieval rulers survived on information. Letters, messengers, rumors, reports from distant villages. A single piece of knowledge. Who met with whom, which lord was losing money, which family was arguing internally, could change the fate of a kingdom. This is why Tywin always seems one step ahead of everyone around him. He behaves like real lords who treated information as currency, and silence as armor. The art of subtle intimidation. Medieval intimidation was rarely physical, it was psychological. A quiet stare, a calm refusal, a deliberate pause before answering. Real letters describe moments where a single look from a powerful lord ended an argument completely. This is Tywin's trademark, not rage, not violence, just unshakable calm. The room where decisions are made. Imagine a medieval council chamber now. A long wooden table, maps laid out, candles burning steadily, soft echoes in the stone walls. Advisors sit quietly, waiting, glancing toward the high-backed chair at the end. Then the door opens. The lord enters. He says nothing at first. He simply takes his seat. The entire room settles into silence. That silence is control. That silence is authority. That silence is the real Tywin Lannister. We now move to a deeper layer. The daily life inside medieval courts, where politics blended with routine, and where Tywin's personality fits perfectly. Life inside a medieval court. To understand Tywin Lannister fully, we must step into a medieval court. Not the battles, not the chaos, but the calm, daily rhythm that shaped the minds of powerful lords. A medieval court was a living organism, quiet, structured, filled with routines that repeated every day, like a slow heartbeat beneath stone walls. Tywin Lannister fits perfectly into this environment because his calm discipline is exactly what a court demanded. The morning rhythm. Imagine dawn inside a great castle. The first light touches banners hanging from high ceilings. Servants move silently through corridors. The air is cool, still, unrushed. The lord of the castle rises early, always early, because in medieval politics, the ruler who wakes before others controls the day. He reviews letters, signs documents, reads reports, listens to the quiet footsteps of messengers carrying news from the edges of the realm. This calm administrative work was the true center of power, not the throne, not the armor. desk, the quill, the steady morning silence. Tywin's early routines in fiction are taken directly from this world. The court as a theatre of silence. A medieval court was not loud, it was not chaotic. It was a place where conversations were measured, voices stayed low, and eyes watched everything. Nobles arrived throughout the morning, knights with small requests, merchants seeking permission, minor lords presenting disputes, envoys carrying gifts and words from distant lands. The lord listened, calmly, without rushing, without showing emotion. Every word mattered, every gesture mattered, every pause mattered. This mirrored Tywin's own demeanor, precise, still, observant. The inner circle. Every powerful lord kept a small circle of trusted advisers. Not large, never large, just a handful of individuals who understood the delicate balance between loyalty and silence. In these private meetings, the real decisions were made. Marriages arranged, alliances renewed, rumors evaluated, and strategies formed for the coming months. The tone was slow, steady, and controlled. Tywin's small councils reflect this exactly. The atmosphere of a room where every voice is calm and every breath feels deliberate. The power of observation. In medieval politics, the most powerful person in the room was not the one talking, but the one listening. Lords paid attention to everything, who hesitated, who avoided eye contact, who smiled too widely, who sighed at the wrong moment. These tiny details revealed alliances, doubts, secrets, and fears. Tywin is written exactly this way, as a man who learns more from silence than others learn from speeches. The evening quiet, as the day faded, a castle settled into stillness. Courtiers withdrew to their rooms. Guards lit torches along the walls. Servants closed heavy doors. The lord might sit near a window, overlooking the land, thinking about next week, next month, next generation. This quiet, reflective moment is one of the most realistic aspects of Tywin Lannister's character, a ruler who lives more in the future than in the present. These rhythms, the calm mornings, the quiet councils, the long evenings of thought, formed the real world that inspired Tywin's personality. Next, we explore a pattern found in every great house of history: the rise, the peak, and the quiet decline that even the strongest cannot escape. The rise and fall of great houses, every medieval house, no matter how mighty, no matter how wealthy, no matter how deeply rooted, followed a quiet, repeating pattern. A rise, a peak, and a decline. This cycle shaped the psychology of every real ruler we've mentioned, and it forms the deepest layer of Tywin Lannister's personality. Because Tywin behaves like someone who has studied the fall of great houses and refuses to let it happen to his own. The rise, built on calm, patient work. The rise of a noble house never happened quickly. It was slow, steady, built over decades of careful decisions. A beneficial marriage, a new alliance, a successful harvest, a debt repaid at the right time. Each choice was small, almost invisible, but each choice raised the house one step higher. Real rulers understood this deeply. They did not chase glory. They chased stability. Tywin's entire philosophy reflects this stage of the cycle, the slow, controlled, disciplined rise. The peak, when a house is strongest. Every great house eventually reached a moment when its power felt unshakable. Its lands were large, its armies loyal, its halls filled with echoes of confidence. But this moment was dangerous, because the peak was also the beginning of decline. Why? Because a house at its strongest usually stopped paying attention to the small details that built its strength, in the first place. Real history is full of examples. Powerful families who grew too comfortable, too confident, too proud. Tywin Lannister understands this danger. He fears it quietly. He keeps working, keeps planning, keeps controlling to stop his family from slipping downward. The decline. Always quiet at first. The fall of a noble house never began with a dramatic disaster. It began in silence. A failed marriage alliance, a bad debt, a careless insult, a winter that lasted too long. Only later did the problems grow loud. Rebellions, lost battles, broken trust. But the seed of decline was always small and always quiet. This truth shaped real rulers like Edward I, Neville, and Charles the Bold. And it shapes Tywin Lannister even more, a man constantly repairing cracks before they turn into fractures. A house from rise to ruin. A quiet example. Imagine a medieval castle that once stood proud on a hill. For generations, its halls were filled with life. Feasts, alliances, warm fires in every room. But one winter arrives with poor harvests. A marriage alliance fails. A neighboring lord grows jealous. The decline begins silently. Years later, the once great castle sits half empty. Stone cracked, tapestries faded, silence replacing laughter. This slow erosion of power terrified real medieval rulers, and it terrifies Tywin Lannister more than any enemy on a battlefield. The fear that shapes Tywin, this cycle, rise, peak, decline, is the quiet force behind all of Tywin's decisions. He is not ruthless because he enjoys control. He is ruthless because he fears that slow, creeping decline that destroyed so many real families in history. This fear makes Tywin one of the most believable figures ever written in fantasy, because he behaves like a real medieval lord trying to stop the inevitable. Next, we explore one of the calmest, most meaningful themes of the entire story: how history transforms powerful men into quiet, lasting legends. How history turns men into legends. As centuries pass, something quiet and mysterious happens to powerful figures. History does not preserve them exactly as they were. It reshapes them, softens certain edges, sharpens others, turns some deeds into symbols, and turns some silences into meaning. This transformation, subtle, slow, and almost invisible, is what turns real medieval rulers into the legends we read about today. It is also what allowed the writers of fiction to reach back into the past and draw out the essence that later became Tywin Lannister. The quiet editing of memory. When a powerful man dies, his memory enters a long journey. Chroniclers write down stories. Poets shape his reputation. Families protect certain details and hide others. Slowly, the man becomes a figure, then a symbol, then a legend. Real rulers like Richard Neville, Edward I, and Charles the Bold were transformed this same way. People remembered their strength and forgot their doubts. They praised their victories and blurred the failures. What remained was a distilled version of the person, the essence that survives across centuries. Tywin Lannister is built from these distilled essences. The shaping of a legend. Imagine a medieval scribe writing in a quiet chamber lit by candlelight. He records the deeds of a powerful lord, not every detail, not every moment, just the parts that fit the story the world will one day remember. A single sentence in his book could shape the reputation of a man who lived and breathed many years before. This selective memory is how real history works. And it is how Tywin's inspirations survived long enough to influence a fictional world centuries later. The mystery of influence. What makes a historical figure inspire stories long after they're gone? It is rarely the battles, rarely the wealth, rarely the achievements. It is the presence, the quiet authority, the sense that their decisions moved the world around them. This presence is what writers seek when creating characters like Tywin. Not the exact life of a single ruler, but the feeling produced by many rulers combined. The shadow that survives, every powerful medieval lord left behind something more than land or titles. They left behind a shadow, an impression on the world that outlived them. Sometimes that shadow became a cautionary tale, sometimes an inspiration, sometimes a myth. Tywin Lannister represents the shadow of many such rulers. A quiet mixture of ambition, discipline, fear, and responsibility, the qualities that history remembers long after the details fade. Why Tywin feels real? Tywin feels real because he moves through his world the same way real lords moved through theirs. Quietly, deliberately, with an understanding that legacy is fragile and that silence is often more powerful than any declaration. This is why Tywin resonates so strongly. He carries the distilled spirit of centuries of medieval rulers whose names still whisper across history. Next, we step into our final reflection. A soft, calm conclusion that brings together all these ideas into one quiet understanding of the real Tywin Lannister. The real Tywin. A quiet reflection. We have walked through centuries of history, through castle halls, silent council chambers, and the minds of rulers whose presence shaped kingdoms. Now, we gather everything we have learned into one calm understanding of what the real Tywin Lannister truly means. Tywin is not one man. He is not Richard Neville alone, nor Edward I, nor Charles the Bold, nor any single figure from the medieval world. He is the essence of an entire historical mindset. A mindset formed by responsibility, by order, by the slow rhythm of daily discipline. Tywin represents the quiet determination of rulers who believed that the fate of their house rested entirely on their shoulders. The lord who thinks in generations. Real medieval rulers rarely thought about their own lifetimes. They thought about their children, and their children's children, and the world that would remain long after they were gone. Tywin's every action is guided by this long view. Not fear of a single battle, but fear of a dynasty collapsing because of one careless moment. This long-term thinking is what makes Tywin feel so authentic, because real medieval power was measured not in victories, but in decades. The ruler who carries silence like armor. If there is one quality shared by all the great rulers whose essence flows into Tywin, it is silence. Not weakness, not passivity, but a deliberate silence that absorbs information, reveals nothing, and forces others to reveal themselves. Silence was a weapon, a shield, a signal of strength. In the Middle Ages, the calmest man in the room was usually the most dangerous. Tywin carries this understanding into every scene. The legacy of responsibility. Real medieval power was not glamorous. It was heavy, demanding, quietly exhausting. Rulers woke early, stayed awake late, thought constantly about threats seen and unseen. Tywin's exhaustion, his sternness, his cold clarity, these come directly from the lived experience of historical lords who knew that one mistake could destroy everything. The humanity beneath the iron. And yet, behind Tywin's iron mask, there is something deeply human. The desire to build something that lasts. the fear that time will erase what generations built, the quiet understanding that power fades, but legacy can endure if guarded with discipline. These emotions are not fictional inventions. They are the same emotions that shaped real rulers, whose names still echo today. The portrait completes itself. When we place everything together, Neville's strategy, Edward's order, Charles's ambition, and the medieval philosophy of legacy, a full picture emerges. Not the fantasy of a golden lion, but the reality of a medieval lord who understands that the world is fragile, power is temporary, and discipline is the only shield that truly lasts. This is the real Tywin. Not a villain, not a hero, but a reflection of the quiet, serious rulers who once walked the stone corridors of real history. Gentle outro, closing the story. We have reached the end of our quiet journey, a path through real history, real rulers, and the echoes they left behind. Tonight, we explored the calm strength of medieval lords, the slow rhythm of their courts, the quiet discipline of their routines, and the lasting weight of legacy and responsibility. We discovered how real figures like Richard Neville, Edward I, and Charles the Bold shaped the presence and philosophy of Tywin Lannister, a character built from centuries of human ambition and fear. Tywin feels real because he reflects the lived experience of the men who once carried the future of their houses on their shoulders. In their silence, in their patience, in their long, steady view of the world, we find the heart of one of the most compelling rulers in modern storytelling. Now, allow the world to grow quiet around you. Let the stone halls fade into gentle darkness. Let the voices of the past settle softly in your mind. Thank you for listening. Rest well, breathe deeply, and join me again in the next chapter of Gentle History.